For more now, let's bring in Ann Simmons. She's the former Moscow bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal. Ann, thank you for being with us. You've spent 5 years on the ground in Moscow, including the first year of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What's the state of the war as we head into this White House meeting tomorrow?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Janae. What I can say from following Russian media and from speaking to military analysts is that it does seem to appear right now that Russia has a battlefield advantage, although the Ukrainians say that that does not mean that this is the end. Certainly, Moscow is touting that it's in a stronger position. If you look back at the meeting between President Trump and President Putin, the Russians are really crowing about this. They are trumpeting it as a success for Russia. It shows that Putin is no longer out in the cold. It shows that Putin is now on a level footing with President Trump and the United States. And this is something that President Putin has actually pushed for a very long time, kind of echoing the mantra of Trump and MAGA that he wants to make Russia great again. And how to do that? It's making sure that Russia and the United States are on a level playing field, that they have an equal place at the table when it comes to global affairs. And I would say that the Russian press is also talking about that a new world order, kind of the beginning of a new world order, one where both Russia and the United States have an equal place at the very top of this chart.
And it's so interesting that you point this out, because exactly what you're saying, Russians are sort of crowing about, or what sort of other world leaders are being very critical of, especially given that the last time Zelensky went into the Oval Office, as Ian noted, it devolved into a blow-up with President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, this time, with so many European allies in the room, how could the tone of this meeting be different, you think, Ann?
Well, you know, this is going to be an extremely difficult meeting for President Zelensky. It goes without saying that you can sense the level of frustration and some of anxiety as he goes into this meeting tomorrow because of what happened in February. But he does go in armed with the support of several heavyweight European leaders. That alone is going to give him a level of confidence. President Zelensky probably needs to go in and take a deep breath, go in very calmly. He certainly doesn't want to rattle President Trump in any way. And I know, again, people might say, well, why should he be deferential to Trump? But President Zelensky needs to drive home. He needs to basically try to appeal to President Trump's humanity. Drive home that his country is still being bombed. Drive home that Ukrainian children still remain against their will in Russia. Drive home the very fact that if President Putin gets away with not moving the ceasefire, dragging out this process, that he eventually could continue, he will win, and he will continue to devastate Ukraine. President Zelensky also needs to drive home, together with his European partners, that this is not just about Ukraine. This is about European security. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important that these other leaders will be attending with Zelensky. I also want to add the way that the Russians are portraying this. They are presenting it as President Zelensky being somewhat of a child or a boy who needs his parents to accompany him on an assignment. And that is extremely denigrating for the Ukrainian leader.
This is all such fascinating context that you are providing, Anne, especially when you mentioned before Russia and the idea of a new world order and Vladimir Putin wanting Russia to appear to be on equal footing with the U.S. Even you saying that some would wonder why Zelensky will go into this meeting tomorrow needing to be deferential to the U.S. president. So when we look at President Trump's summit with Putin in Alaska, what does all of this say about the influence that the United States has right now in these negotiations?
I think it speaks volumes in the sense that it shows that there's now a different relationship between Russia and the U.S. Things have changed. It basically shows that there is a level of normalization, and it signals that there will be greater normalization between the US and Russia. It also tells me that President Putin managed to get into the ear of President Trump and convince President Trump to a certain degree of the Russian narrative, that there doesn't need to be a ceasefire before a peace deal, that Russia doesn't need to give any concessions, that Russia is the aggrieved party here, Russia is the victim, that Russia does need to take the remainder of the Donbass in order for there to be peace, and that Russia wants peace. So it seems, coming out of the summit in Alaska, that President Trump, to a certain degree, has actually fallen for that. But more will tell tomorrow, will be revealed tomorrow with this meeting in the White House. And one does hope that the Ukrainians, President Zelensky, will be able to stand his ground, will be able to make a very strong case with the European leaders.
We certainly all will be watching what happens tomorrow, all remembering that, of course, it was Russia that invaded Ukraine and started all of this. Ann Simmons, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate you.